What good is attention without intention? I'm Ray Myers. Welcome to Craft versus Cruft. And today, I did have some slides about something called a goal tree, which is a thinking process that's part of theory of constraints introduced by Ellie Goldratt and refined into logical thinking process by Bill Detmer. However, let's pull back and talk about what the goals and intentions are with this channel itself, because we got some really interesting things happening right now. In particular, I'm honored to present at not one but 3 conferences next month in May, 2 that are virtual and one which is both virtual and in person, which is Craft 10 in Budapest. So you can tune in online or in the latter case, even in person. If I get a chance to see you, I would love to. These talks overlap, but they're all a little bit different. If you have any questions on these topics, I would certainly enjoy that as food for thought as I'm preparing. But these are, as you see, May 16th, May 21st, and May 30th and 31st, that weekend in Budapest. First up, May 16th is Mendercon. That's put on by Corgi Bytes and the Legacy Code Rocks community. Very good people. And my talk is AI Coding, the State of the Mend. So over the past year, we have found a lot of things as far as using AI to code that do work and some that work less well. So this is going to be kind of what do we know works right now. The next one at Artificially Intelligent Enterprise Conference, which I was happy to be invited to recently after my podcast with John Willis on his Attention is All You Need show, link in the description. Great conversation with John, very, very happy to be on that. So Copilot to Nopilot, the rise of autonomous dev tools is my talk there. And if you've seen my previous episodes on Devin and the other autonomous dev tools, as I call them, that are emerging, then you kind of know the direction that's on. So this is a little more forward-looking, whereas the previous, the Mendercon talk is a little bit more about what we know right now about what already works. However, I do plan on demonstrating at least one technique with autonomous dev tools that you'd be able to implement today. And finally, Craft 10 in Budapest. This is an honor, honestly, to be a part of this event. My talk is called Code Mending for the AI Age, and it contains elements of both these other talks in terms of what works now and where do we see this particular direction with autonomous dev tools going. I would also like to put in some stuff unique for this one about where do crafters, where do software quality coaches and the like, where do we fit into this? Because although by and large, I think this group has been left out of the AI conversation, I think it's very important that we get in it. So in addition to it just being a phenomenal honor to take this stage, it's also a really exciting opportunity to be able to deliver that message at this point in history. However, as I see more interest in my content that is about, in some capacity, artificial intelligence, it does make me want to increasingly take stock and double down on the channel's original values. You'll see that the channel's description is still Craft versus Cruft, Meditations on Software Quality and Professionalism. It is not AI or AI and software or, hey, did you notice Llama 3 just came out? That's pretty awesome. I mean, it is. That's fine. Other channels are gonna handle that. It's gonna be okay. But the reason I started this was to give guidance to mid-career software developers. The need for that has not gone away. And so when I enter the AI conversation, I remember this. And the whole point was to bring into that conversation, which is happening, which is a very influential and important conversation right now, to bring into it what hasn't gone away, which is the craft. The nature of software development and how poorly understood it is. That is still in play. One of my definitive statements of this was a short video from a year ago, Refactor GPT and the Future of Maintenance. I expanded some of those thoughts into the Mechanized Mending Manifesto you'll see on Mender.AI. And you can see what I'm doing there is really more about bringing in truths of the nature of software engineering into the AI conversation rather than trying to bring the AI conversation out here into software engineering. For instance, one of the really important truths I covered there was we're not limited by our ability to write new code. We're relatively good at that. We're limited by our ability to continue owning and adapting all the existing code that we've already created. So if we're not even addressing the real limitations in our situation, it really doesn't matter how much we optimize them. We're not actually going to help the situation. We might actually make it worse. No matter how fast you can pump gas, it's not going to help you if you don't know whether to put it in the gas tank or the glove compartment. So as I continue to reach people, I want to carry forward these values of expressing deep truths about the craft itself. You've heard me say that 2024 is the year of formal methods. So this is what that whole thing was about, right? 2023 was the year of generative AI, these exciting new technologies that can do a whole lot of things, but ultimately we're unable to predict what they're going to do. When we have these things that deal with ambiguity very well, opening up new possibilities, but at the same time, they behave very unpredictably, it is hard to know what to do with this. It's hard to know how to build things properly with that. So the year of formal methods is a response to this. Formal methods is a family of techniques for bringing mathematical rigor into coding. So what comes after that? And this is not necessarily that it has to be this year and that year for you, right? This is just sort of a projected learning path. Well, after that, for a while I thought, maybe, and this comes from an episode of the Latent Space podcast where they talked to people from SourceCraft. They had talked about in that episode something called the Normsky architecture, which is just a jamming together of Peter Norvig and Noam Chomsky's name to sort of talk about a debate that had happened historically about the future of artificial intelligence. Should it be symbolic AI or should it be neural networks, right? And the idea of the Normsky architecture was, well, we should be taking advantage of both. So yes, perhaps what comes after this is a fusion, is using the best high assurance, mathematically certain algorithms in combination with these, fuzzy systems like LLMs and so forth. What could that look like? And my human logic prototype from a few episodes ago is an example of that. Is that really where this ends up? I think that leaves something out still. Try this on for size. 2025, the year of human factors. Going back to that mechanized mending manifesto, it's a mistake to think of any of the three elements I discussed there, large language models, so that'd be your generative AI piece, and algorithms, kind of analogous to formal methods here, and then humans. It's a mistake to think of any of those as replacing one of the others. They have different strengths and weaknesses. So we really need to think about all of these different pieces of the puzzle and what the strengths and weaknesses are and how we can assemble them into a really healthy, beneficial system. Expanding these a little, ergonomics, which actually was heavily influenced by safety research as well as was resilience engineering. Empathy, which is its own technical area of study. And this is all brought together by systems thinking. When I talk about theory of constraints, that is very related to logic, but it also is very much systems thinking and about human nature. So there's a lot of different bodies of knowledge here, and obviously we're not going to be able to become an expert in every single one, but we do need to at least know enough to know what the nature even is of the problem in front of us. Which area should we be trying to look at? Going back in the history of the channel, my very second episode was Software Engineering is Social, after my first one, Ship Value. And in that, I talk about how code is communication. You notice a reference in that was the talk, Empathy is a Technical Skill by Andrea Goulet. If only she were here, she'd be able to tell you more. Wait, what?
Hello.
You just jumped out of YouTube. What is happening? This is amazing. Well, since you're here, why don't you tell us for yourself, why did you feel the need to talk about empathy in technology? Something that people say, is not even a thing to be talked about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I got into the software industry kind of a circuitous route. I started in strategic communications and sales first, where you kind of like can't do your job unless you know how to empathize with people. And a friend of mine from high school asked me to join his startup. Thought I would be good at it. We hit it off. It was great. And I wanted to take those same principles that I knew worked so well and bring them into the organizational philosophy, because I didn't see that there was a difference between communication and code. And you know what really struck me is that when I was first learning to code, I saw this diagram from Claude Shannon, which was the like general communication system, where you've got a source and then it goes, you get a message and it goes through a transceiver and then it goes to a channel to, a receiver and then a destination. That is literally the exact same diagram that I saw in my marketing and communication classes. Not a derivative, not inspired by, the same. And so that was like, what? So the more I kind of started having these little inklings, Scott and I decided that we were going to build our entire operations at Corgi Bytes around empathy. That was our first core skill. But I've told this story before. There was a consultant that early on said, you can't say the word empathy and software in the same sentence because you'll be laughed out of the industry. And at that moment, it was kind of like a hold my tea, beer, whatever I was drinking. This doesn't make any sense. So that was like 2009. And so I've been just really exploring this deeply for 15 years. We disregarded that person's suggestion. We made empathy the core. I talked about kind of this idea of like empathy is a technical skill and communication is just as important as code. And so I started keynoting, getting invited to really cool conferences. And, in the past 3 years, I'm writing a book called Empathy Driven Software Development. I started a community, Empathy in Tech, which is where we come together. But before I started Empathy in Tech, a key thing was that I started a community, or just found a group of people who needed someone to create the basic infrastructure for a community. And that was Legacy Code Rocks. So that's where Ray and I met, hosted a podcast there. And I've been wanting to launch a podcast for Empathy in Tech for a few years now. And here we are. When we think of empathy as a technical skill, we know how to reverse engineer where a breakdown happens in communication. And that's really what I'm trying to lead a movement in, is to stop thinking about empathy as a psychic ability, which is how we've thought of it for the past 100 years, and to start really following the newer science, which shows that it's a system, it's skills, it is about context, it's about motivation, it's about cognitive and rational thinking just as much as it is about emotion, it's about regulation, and it's about communication. There is so much that goes into this, but the really cool thing is that when you dive into the nuance of this, there are so many principles from the world of software that directly apply to how we communicate and how we empathize. So, yeah, I could talk about this for days.
That's fascinating. And for people who aren't familiar with your work in that company you started, the Corgi Bytes, right?
Yeah.
Also the creators of the Legacy Code Rocks podcast, if any of you have seen that, you had a narrative that you put out along the lines there, which was makers versus menders. And anyone who's seen my website, Mender.AI, I want to point out, like, that was named after that work, the makers versus menders conversation that you and Scott had started. Could you talk a little bit about what that meant to you?
Yeah. So it started because, so there were kind of two things. First was that in 2009, 2010, when we were trying to figure out what's our value proposition, what we want to do, Scott was really interested in fixing code. He didn't want to work on greenfield projects. And the reason that he wanted to start this consultancy was because he worked in larger government organizations, enterprise companies, and he would see problems and he's like, they wouldn't let me fix it. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Now I get it. But we were walking into a Barnes and Noble and there was this table for makers. And Scott was like, where's my table? What do you call me? I like, okay, great. And I'm a maker. That's kind of that's kind of one of the like secret shames that I have a little bit around legacy code rocks. But at the same time, that's what was needed, that like energy of just starting it. So I identify as a maker. Scott was like, what do I call myself? Tagline for our company was old code, new tricks. And I had put together, like I was trying to comprehend a little bit of like his philosophy and what he was talking about. And so I put together something from the marketing world that I was familiar with, which was the product development life cycle. So you have like introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. And Scott, told me, well, we can't show that chart. I was like, I don't understand. Why not? He goes, because we're agile. It needs to be a circle. I was like, what? He goes, everything in agile is circle. There is nothing linear. So take this. And so then I was like, that makes no sense, because if you turn this into a circle, then what do you have? And what we realized there was that you have two halves where makers are really great in the introduction and growth phase. But then if you want to reinvent and really capitalize on what you've already built, then you need people who are going to scale it and then turn that creative energy so that you can create something new. And that's where the Mender, so it was kind of like two halves of the same circle. And we just sat there, I was a former copywriter, so we went through and was like, okay, well, what can we say instead of makers? Because we knew that there was like this term, and Scott was like, that's me, that's what I love to do. Like after something's grown, like it's mature, like it needs to be tended. So we were like tender, fixer, like, and just basically pulled out the thesaurus, and Mender came up and he was like, that feels right. Plus the copywriter in me was very happy because there's some alliteration in there. Yeah. And it just resonated. I mean, I still get people on LinkedIn or, that just say that this changed the course of their careers. But it really started because Scott didn't feel like he belonged. And so we needed to create a place where he felt like he belonged. And about 10% of people are Menders. We used to raise your hand if you love fixing bugs in established, code bases, and a legacy code project sounds like fun. And most people would laugh in the audience, but there would always be like maybe 2 or 3 people who would come afterwards and they're like, you like doing this too? Because there used to be this, and I think there still is to some extent, almost this like secret shame. And the Legacy Code Rocks community was always about just celebrating how necessary and important this is. And it is just as important and deserves as much celebration as all of the innovation and new ideas. So that was really kind of where it started. And now we've got Mendercon and all this cool stuff. But all I did, I think, was just wanted people to feel like they belonged and had a place to belong. And it's really neat because just starting the basic infrastructure, but Ray, you and Nicola, like there's been so many people that y'all are now growing it, and you've really like made that term not just a copywriting term, like you've made it an identity.
Well, thank you. I mean, we're trying. So speaking of Mendercon, coming up in a few short weeks, May 16th. So definitely check that out. It's been a very excellent conference when I've been there. And I'm also actually presenting this time around, which is awesome. And there are open spaces if you would like to come start a room about your own ideas. So from there, from Corgi Bites, what is next for empathy in tech, do you think?
Yeah, so I'm kind of at this place where I'm really interested in exploring kind of what's next. And I started, similar to Legacy Code Rocks, like let's start a Discord channel. So I'm kind of following that same pattern that worked so well for Legacy Code Rocks around empathy in tech. But I'm taking it a step further. So we're in the process of formalizing into a nonprofit, because to me, I really want to lead that revolution, that scientific revolution where we stop thinking of empathy as that psychic ability and just really embrace the science and change the way people think about empathy, similar to how we change the way we think about legacy code. And in order to do that, I think there's just a different structure that needs to happen. So I'm in the process there, but one of the cool things about it is that I've been wanting to launch a podcast for a really long time,
Really?
but needed a co-host. And Ray is going to be the co-host.
I am.
Yes, you are.
Oh my goodness. This is fantastic news.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I'm glad I had you on, or else I never would have found out. That's absolutely awesome. We better get busy on that.
Yeah.
So we will see you soon. Any more parting thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I'm just really excited, Ray, because you bring this great background that is so balanced between cutting edge and like you're so focused on like AI and the trends. I love your model that you just shared, and I think it's right of, you know, kind of looking at then we need structure, but then really it's going to come back to humanity and empathy. So I think you're right on track there, and you're already integrating this, but you're not like so caught on the cutting edge that you're not thinking about like, well, how is this going to be sustainable? So I'm really excited to, and then also your background in radio and having produced this and just knowing you from Legacy Code Rocks and everything. It's been really fun. And then we've got a couple of episodes in the can. So hopefully we'll be able to get some episodes out soon. So more to come on that. But I'm very, very excited to interview some amazing people in this space and learn.
Indeed. I'm super excited as well. And thank you for joining us, Andrea. And as Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, with patience, the most tangled cord may be undone. Thank you.